In the summer of 1965, the crew of the Gemini 4 spacecraft drifted in the silent vacuum of Earth orbit. Their mission included photographing the surface of our planet to identify potential impact craters. But as they looked down at the vast, unbroken expanse of the African continent, they found something that defied all expectations. Staring back at them from the desolate golden sands of the Sahara Desert was a colossal, unblinking eye, a perfect concentric formation spanning 40 kilometers across. It was so massive and so perfectly circular that it could only be fully comprehended from the edge of space. For decades, mainstream science has comfortably labeled this terrifyingly symmetrical anomaly the Richat Structure. The official narrative handed down by geologists is that it is merely an eroded geological dome, a random trick of nature sculpted by wind and time over millions of years. But what if this explanation is nothing more than a desperate attempt to cover up a reality that shatters our understanding of history? What if the foundation of our civilization is built on a collective amnesia? Today we dive into the heart of the Mauritanian desert to uncover a mystery that has left modern science completely paralyzed. Prepare to question everything you have been taught about the timeline of humanity. Let us step back into the shadows of antiquity to the year 360 BC. The legendary Greek philosopher Plato composed two profound dialogues known as Timaeus and Critias. Within these texts, he did not merely spin a fantastical myth about a sunken city. He laid out a highly specific, meticulously detailed architectural and geographical blueprint of an advanced civilization. A civilization he claimed existed 9,000 years before his own time. Mainstream historians have aggressively and systematically dismissed Atlantis as a philosophical allegory. They mock and ostracize anyone who dares to treat Plato's accounts as historical fact. But when we superimpose Plato's ancient descriptions over the Richat structure, we are confronted with coincidences that are mathematically and geographically impossible to ignore. Plato described the capital city of Atlantis as a marvel of engineering composed of concentric rings of alternating water and land. Specifically, he detailed 2 rings of land and 3 of water. When you observe the satellite imagery of the eye of the Sahara today, the visual is haunting. You see exactly that. A colossal bullseye of concentric circles perfectly mirroring the ancient Greek texts. But the terrifying similarities do not end with mere shapes. Plato was a scholar of precision. He recorded the exact dimensions of the central island and its surrounding rings. He stated that the overall diameter of the city was 127 stadia. When converted to modern measurements, that translates to approximately 23.5 kilometers. When independent researchers and satellite mapping systems measured the outer ring of the Richat structure, the diameter was exactly 23.5 kilometers. This level of mathematical precision is absolutely chilling. How could a naturally eroded dome in the middle of the desert perfectly match the precise measurements of a mythical city recorded thousands of years ago? The academic world remains stubbornly silent on this correlation. They hastily brush it off as pareidolia. They claim it is just the human brain trying to find familiar patterns in random geological chaos, but the geographical evidence continues to mount, overwhelming the fragile dams of conventional history. According to the ancient texts, the great city of Atlantis was protected by towering majestic mountains to the north, which were celebrated for their extraordinary beauty and size. To the south, the city opened up to a massive plain that sloped gently down to the ocean. When we analyze the modern topography of Mauritania, the eye of the Sahara is perfectly shielded to the north by the dramatic Adrar mountain plateau. To the south, there is a clear and uninterrupted slope leading directly to the Atlantic Ocean. Furthermore, advanced satellite radar imaging has recently revealed a massive ancient river network buried right beneath the Saharan sands. The Tamanrasset River system once flowed through this exact region, emptying into the sea. Geological surveys have confirmed that this entire region of the Sahara was once entirely submerged underwater. Massive whale skeletons and ancient marine fossils have been found scattered across the dry dunes. The Sahara was not always a desolate wasteland. It was once a lush, vibrant environment pulsing with life. Plato even mentioned a very specific detail about the construction of the city. He noted that the stones quarried to build the great walls of Atlantis were colored black, white, and red. In and around the Richat Structure, geologists have documented an overwhelming abundance of rocks in these exact three colors: the black of volcanic basalt, the white of quartz, and the red of oxidized sandstone. Is this simply an endless parade of blind coincidences? Or is it the arrogance of modern history refusing to acknowledge the physical evidence staring them right in the face? The establishment is terrified to admit that the cradle of civilization might have been obliterated long before the first pyramids were ever conceived. Because of these terrifying coincidences, geologists and expeditions descended upon the Richat Structure, expecting to find a simple conventional explanation. They brought their ground-penetrating radar, their seismic sensors, their mass spectrometers, and their absolute certainty that this was merely a trick of nature. The initial consensus, dictated by the highest academic institutions, was that the eye of the Sahara had to be a massive meteorite impact crater. It was deemed the only logical explanation for such a colossal and perfectly symmetrical ring system spanning dozens of kilometers. It seemed like an open and shut case. But when field researchers finally drove their heavy drilling rigs into the unforgiving center of the structure and began extracting deep core samples, the meteorite hypothesis completely collapsed. There was absolutely no central shock zone. There were no shatter cone rock formations, which are the undeniable and universally accepted signatures of a high-velocity asteroid impact. There were no extraterrestrial iridium layers deposited in the soil. The rocks were simply arranged in perfect concentric circles, extending deep into the Earth without any sign of cosmic collision. Defeated by the absolute absence of impact evidence, the scientific community quickly and rather desperately pivoted to a totally new theory. They declared it must be a volcanic dome uplift, a massive blister of molten magma that pushed up from the deep mantle, created a dome, and then somehow collapsed back down upon itself. But this explanation is riddled with catastrophic and embarrassing logical flaws that no geologist wants to address on camera. Where is the volcanic cone? Where are the massive basaltic lava flows that should have flooded the surrounding desert for hundreds of miles in every direction? Where are the thick volcanic ash layers in the local geological record? They simply do not exist. Instead, what researchers actually found at the very center of the Richat Structure sent a cold shiver down the collective spine of the scientific community. They discovered massive concentrated deposits of hydrothermal megabreccias. These are incredibly jagged, fragmented rocks that have been violently and instantaneously fused together under conditions of unimaginable heat and crushing pressure. We are talking about temperatures so extreme that the solid bedrock itself was completely melted, vaporized, and then rapidly cooled into a bizarre hybrid stone. In a natural sedimentary uplift, such intense, isolated thermal anomalies should be fundamentally impossible. Furthermore, detailed magnetic surveys conducted over the inner rings revealed chaotic magnetic anomalies that completely defy all conventional geological modeling. The natural magnetic field within the structure is violently distorted and inverted, as if the rocks were subjected to a sudden and immense pulse of electromagnetic energy. A pulse so strong it permanently realigned the magnetic north within the stones. Yet mainstream science, in a display of profound intellectual paralysis, continues to lazily classify it as a deeply eroded geological dome. They throw their hands up and expect the public to blindly believe that random wind and seasonal water erosion somehow carved a mathematically perfect 23.5-kilometer wide bullseye into the hard bedrock while simultaneously melting the absolute center into glass. It is a desperate, scientifically hollow explanation that utterly fails to account for the extreme isolated heat signatures, the magnetic chaos, and the flawless concentric symmetry. Because of this glaring systemic incompetence and the scientific community's stubborn refusal to investigate further, a much darker and deeply disturbing hypothesis has emerged from independent researchers and rogue astrophysicists. If neither a subterranean volcano nor an apocalyptic asteroid can create such perfectly symmetrical heat-fused rings, then what exactly did? What forces in the universe possess the surgical capability to instantaneously vaporize millions of tons of solid rock while leaving a perfectly circular geographical footprint? To answer this terrifying question, we must look away from traditional geology and turn our attention to the darkest chapters of modern human warfare. In the desolate deserts of New Mexico, at the Alamogordo test site, where the very first atomic bomb was detonated, scientists found something chilling in the aftermath. The extreme unnatural heat of the nuclear blast had instantly melted the desert sand into a greenish radioactive glass known today as trinitite. Now look back at the eye of the Sahara. Scattered across the inner rings of the Richat Structure are vast, unexplained patches of heavily vitrified sand and rock, sand that has been superheated into glass under conditions that perfectly mimic a thermonuclear detonation. But the scale of the Richat Structure requires an energy output millions of times greater than the bombs dropped in the 20th century. The terrifying hypothesis derived from these anomalies is this: the great city of Atlantis was not swallowed by a natural tectonic earthquake or a gradual climatic flood. It was systematically targeted and deliberately obliterated. The Richat Structure is not merely the foundation of a lost city. It is the permanent blast radius of a hyper-advanced weapon system. Whether it was a devastating kinetic bombardment dropping massive tungsten rods from a high-orbit platform or a directed plasma strike from an unknown aggressor, the outcome was absolute and instantaneous annihilation. The intense heat fused the city to the bedrock, vaporized its oceans of surrounding water, and instantly incinerated its inhabitants. The sheer thermal shock wave would have ripped through the atmosphere, permanently altering the climate of the entire region. This brings us to a horrifying realization. The Sahara was not always a vast, lifeless ocean of sand. It was violently turned into one overnight. The eye is a catastrophic warning permanently burned into the face of our planet. A massive unhealing scar left behind by a conflict so ancient and so devastating that it entirely erased the greatest empire in human history from the surface of the earth. It relegated their towering technological marvels, their advanced society, and their entire existence to the realm of myth and children's fantasy. If an empire that advanced, that powerful, and that globally dominant could be wiped clean, turning into nothing but fused glass and blowing sand, what makes us think that we are somehow safe today? What makes us arrogantly believe that the architects of that ancient destruction are not still watching us from the dark silence of the cosmos, waiting for humanity to cross a certain technological threshold? The evidence of our fragility is not hidden. It is carved into the very bedrock of the African continent, waiting for humanity to finally wake up from its collective historical amnesia. The scientific establishment can continue to look the other way, but the eye remains open, and it continues to stare back at the stars. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying descent into the unknown mysteries of our past. If this journey has shattered your perception of mainstream history, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave your deepest thoughts in the comments below. What do you truly believe the Eye of the Sahara is? Is it just a random geological fluke? Or is it the radioactive tombstone of Atlantis? Stay vigilant. Keep your eyes on the stars and join us in the next video.